Dear friend, not that you are clicking wrongly on this video, nor that you are accidentally scrolling to this video. God has arranged these things. You come here and are led by God to listen to something that may change the way you walk in the darkness. There are moments in life, all sounds silent, all doors closed, and all your prayers seem to no longer fly beyond your roof. Have you ever encountered that? Perhaps you did not know that there was someone who had once fallen into such a circumstance, at a time distant from our era by more than 2,600 years. His name is Habakkuk. A prophet, not outstanding in miracles or threatening oracles, but he did something that made all of heaven pay attention. He dared to ask God, "Lord, why do the righteous suffer? Why are you silent when the innocent are swallowed up? Until when, Lord?" In the midst of a gray twilight in the land of Judah, where war is about to break out, morals disintegrate, and faith is torn apart, Habakkuk knelt down, looked up to the sky, and spoke words that perhaps you have also spoken. Today's video is not a sermon, it is an invitation, a journey, a call to your soul, so that you may walk with Habakkuk through doubt, silence, waiting, and finally is a hymn of worship in the desert. Because there are questions that do not need answers. There are long nights that do not need light. Only one thing, to trust, even though you see nothing. If your heart is weary, if you have ever doubted, if you have ever questioned God yet still wish to keep your faith, then this is the video for you. Welcome to Jesus Stories. Today's story will not end with a spectacular miracle, but with a faith deeper than ever before. Habakkuk did not appear during the glorious years of the kingdom of Israel or in the peaceful era of Judah. He lived in a dark period where the entire nation was sliding down the slope of moral, political, and spiritual decay. That was when the faith of an entire nation and of each individual was challenged to the extreme. Judah, a land once called the people of the Lord, now trembles before the collapse from within as well as the threat from without. The corruption did not only come from foreign forces, but also originated right in the heart of the populace, where justice was distorted, where the cries of the poor were forgotten, and where the presence of the Lord seemed to become distant. Habakkuk, with the sensitive heart of one who loves and reveres the Lord, could not stand by and watch the decay without feeling sorrow. He was not only a prophet, but also an observer, a living witness of his time. From the small village where he lived, he saw officials taking bribes, judges ignoring what was right, and the powerful trampling the innocent as if they had no soul. The cries that no one answered, the pleas that no one heard, all became a gloomy soundtrack that resounded every day. Habakkuk saw single mothers carrying their children asking for food, saw children wandering on the streets, saw priests performing religious rituals as an empty, unspiritual, emotionless job. Morality had become a distant memory. If the internal decay is a wound that continues to bleed, then the threat from the Babylonian Empire is the sword hanging over Judah's head. The armies of Babylon were not only militarily strong, but also brutal in their treatment of the conquered nations. News of plundered lands, burned temples, and thousands of people taken into slavery made the heart of Judah tremble. Habakkuk knew that the populace was not only losing its direction and spirit, but also lacked the ability to defend itself militarily. Even though they had fortresses, had guards, what they lacked was the fear of the Lord, and that was what made them most vulnerable. In such a context, what happens to faith? For Habakkuk, he did not lose faith, but that faith was shaken, challenged, and pushed to its limits. He began to question, why is the Lord silent? Why does he not intervene? Why do the wicked prosper, while the righteous suffer? These questions were not a sign of disloyalty, but a true expression of a faith under pressure. And just as steel must be forged by fire to become hard, faith also needs to be tested to become pure. Habakkuk did not reject the Lord, but he did not accept silence as an answer. Habakkuk did not give up. He did not turn his back because he saw the Lord silent. He chose to face it. He chose to continue questioning, with all reverence but also with complete honesty. And at that point, he stepped into a journey that many of us are also taking, the journey of those who believe in the Lord but do not see the Lord act as expected. The silence of the Lord is not a rejection. Sometimes it is the time for faith to mature. For the one who prays to understand that the Lord is not only the one who answers the request, but is the one who changes the very person who prays. Habakkuk did not live in a secure world, but it was precisely in that chaos that he began to write one of the most profound programs of faith in the entire Bible. A faith that does not need evidence, does not need immediate victory, but is based on an unchanging Lord. And that is exactly where his story begins, and also where the journey of our own faith, in the midst of a dark age, can find its support. Questioning is a profound form of faith. It does not oppose trust in the Lord, but is rather a brave step into the land of truth, even when that truth is still shrouded by darkness. Habakkuk did not choose to remain silent before the pain of the nation. He did not remain indifferent to the invisibility of the Lord. On the contrary, he stepped into dialogue, not as an adversary, but as a child at home, daring to ask his father those painful things. Habakkuk did not question from a place full of arrogance, but from the lowest place, where his heart was shattered by witnessing decay. Lord, until when will you not hear my plea? That is the groan of one who both loves his nation and loves his Lord, and does not understand why those two things are in conflict. People often think that faith is quiet, but sometimes true faith is a scream, not because of a lack of belief, but because of believing too much, to the point of not being able to accept reality as it is unfolding. Habakkuk prayed not for a day, a week, but for many months, many years. He saw nothing change. There was no rain of miracles from heaven. No fire from the heavens fell on the wicked. There was only silence. That terrible silence made him ask, "Where are you, O Lord?" That is not rebellion, but a prayer that has turned into a cry of a soul unwilling to live in apathy. Imagine a mother praying for her child who is lying in hospital. A week has passed, with no sign of recovery. The doctors shake their heads, yet that mother continues to pray. On the 10th day she begins to cry, "Lord, I have trusted you. Why are you silent? I have lived for you, taught my child to worship you. Why do you not take action?" That question does not prove that she has lost faith. It proves that such faith is undergoing a trial, and it is precisely in that trial that the Lord is not far, even though he seems silent. Habakkuk is the same. He did not only question for himself, he questioned for the entire nation, for the poor, for the widows, for those exploited and oppressed. In that moment, he became the voice of the voiceless. Perhaps you have never thought that questioning the Lord is a form of worship, but that is the truth. For when you dare to bring all your questions, all your anger, all your tears to the Lord, you are acknowledging that he is the only one worthy of your conversation. Habakkuk did not run to others. He did not write a petition letter to the king. He did not organize a protest in the streets. He came to the Lord with all the turmoil in his heart, and the Lord did not turn him away. People today are the same. There have been those in the late night standing alone on a rooftop or in a deserted place, shouting, "Lord, why?" And even though there is no immediate answer, they remain there, not leaving, not turning away, simply standing before the Lord. And that is true faith. There is one comforting thing in Habakkuk's story. The Lord does not reproach him for having asked. He did not strike him with lightning. He did not say, "You are unfaithful." On the contrary, the Lord listens. And then when the time is right, he answers. That is what we need to remember. The Lord is not offended by sincere questions. If you ask with humility, even in pain, he will not turn his back. Habakkuk opened an important theological door. We can question the Lord, not to challenge him, but to come closer to him. The questions, if asked in the right way, will not weaken faith, but will make faith take deeper root. There is a simple kind of faith, believing when everything goes smoothly. But there is a more mature kind of faith, that is believing when you see nothing, feel nothing, understand nothing. And it is precisely in that realm that Habakkuk chose to trust rather than turn away. That is why we need to learn from him. Perhaps today you are praying while it seems that heaven remains closed. Perhaps you see rampant cruelty while the promise seems distant. But if Habakkuk can stand there, question the Lord, and still not forsake the Lord, you can too. Habakkuk did not receive an immediate answer, but he did not leave. He waited. He turned back to pray. He sought the Lord once more, and it is precisely in that waiting that he became strong. Faith is not a destination, it is a journey that sometimes is walked in light, but often is only walked by the echo in the darkness. Habakkuk is living proof of that, and he is also an image for you today. If you are praying, if you are waiting, if you are questioning, you are not alone, and you are not weak. Perhaps you are living a faith more true than ever. Habakkuk waited. He did not give up, did not turn his back, did not cease questioning. And then, after a long time in silence, the Lord answered. But that answer was not a gentle consolation, much less a miracle that reversed the situation. It was a declaration that shook the faith of the faithful prophet. I am acting in your time, something you will not believe even if someone recounts it. I am raising up the people of Babylon, a fierce and brutal people, to execute judgment upon Judah. For Habakkuk, that was a bolt from the blue. He had waited for the Lord to act, but not in this way. Babylon, the enemy of all righteousness, an evil, massacring, arrogant, and idolatrous nation? How can a righteous God use evil to accomplish his purpose? The Lord's answer made Habakkuk, and all of us today, confront an uncomfortable truth. The Lord is not limited by human definitions of justice. He does not act according to the moral framework we are accustomed to. And when he chooses a means that seems contrary to his nature to execute justice, that does not mean he changes, but that we do not understand the depth of his rule. Habakkuk once believed that the righteousness of the Lord must be manifested by punishing the wicked and protecting the righteous. But now, the Lord is using a nation more wicked than Judah to execute judgment on his people. That is a paradox. That is a shock. But it is also at that point that faith is pushed to a new frontier, where it no longer depends on reason but on a profound discernment of the nature of the Lord. Biblical history is not lacking in similar cases. The Lord once used Pharaoh, who refused to let the people of Israel go, to manifest his power through miracles. He once allowed Job to be tested by Satan, not because he sinned, but to prove true faith. He also used foreign nations such as Assyria, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome to carry out his long-term plans, although each empire carried within itself arrogance and violence. Even in the New Testament, the cross, a symbol of disgrace and punishment for sinners, was used by the Lord as an instrument of salvation. Is that not also a paradox? Jesus, the innocent, died as a criminal to grant eternal life to a sinful humanity. Habakkuk was not the first to be shocked by the methods of the Lord, and he is not the last. What shook Habakkuk the most was not only that Babylon would punish Judah, but that Babylon is even more brutal than Judah. Lord, why do you let the wicked swallow up the righteous? He asked. And that question continues to echo through all generations. Why does the Lord allow dictatorial governments to sit on thrones? Why do such brutal crimes occur in broad daylight? Why are churches being persecuted while heresies flourish? If the Lord is righteous, why does he not intervene immediately? The answer, though not easy to accept, is the Lord is still acting. But he acts in his own time, and when he uses the instruments that we deem unworthy, it does not mean that he endorses wickedness. He will still execute judgment on Babylon, but first, he must correct Judah. We like a just God, but sometimes we forget that justice must begin in the house of the Lord. Habakkuk had to learn that. Judah is not blameless, and once God's people forget the covenant, they themselves will be held accountable. Judgment does not exclude the chosen, it begins with them. Habakkuk believed in a loving God. Now he must learn to believe in a judging God. He once hoped for the restoration of righteousness. Now he must witness that righteousness descending in a form that no one desires. This is the point where many modern believers also stumble. We believe that the Lord is good, so everything that happens must be good right before our eyes. But mature faith must learn to accept that which temporarily seems paradoxical, to believe that in the end, the Lord's plan is perfect. Habakkuk did not see the comprehensive plan, but he saw a part. And that part was enough to make him continue to believe, even though his heart remained in turmoil. In his answer, the Lord did not apologize to Habakkuk for using Babylon. He did not justify himself. He only asserted, "I will cause it to happen, and when the time comes, I will execute judgment upon Babylon." This is the crucial point. The Lord may use evil as an instrument, but he never lets evil prevail completely. Every instrument used will eventually be judged. Babylon, even though used by the Lord, will still be judged for its own sins. The Lord does not turn a blind eye. He is the ruler, not only over what is good, but also over what is evil. There is nothing outside his control, and that is precisely what makes him worthy of trust, even when his actions surpass human understanding. Today, we also see modern Babylons. Immoral organizations still prosper. Nations that oppress the ways of the Lord are still developing. Wicked leaders have not yet been overthrown, and we may feel helpless, confused, just like Habakkuk. But the Lord is still acting. No power, no nation, no individual is beyond his judgment, and he will still carry out his plan in a way that makes every knee bow and every tongue confess that he is the Lord. Habakkuk could not change the present, but he could change his perspective. And from that, he began to step into a new phase in the journey of faith, no longer demanding an answer that is easy to hear, but learning to trust in a Lord whose program transcends all human limitations. After those questions and the shocking answer from the Lord, Habakkuk did not react like a rebel. On the contrary, he retreated to a solitary place, a spiritual watchtower, where he placed his waiting and observed the pronouncement of the Lord. He did not give up, did not flee. Habakkuk decided to remain amid the turmoil, to seek the expression from the Most High. And in that quiet place, he was granted something beyond any human thought. A revelation. Not merely a dream, but a revelation from heaven. A prophecy concerning eternal justice. The Lord declared, "Write the revelation on a tablet, clearly engraving it so that whoever reads it may run to proclaim it. For the revelation is still waiting for its appointed time. It will come at the proper moment, not delayed." Habakkuk had to learn an important lesson, and so must we. The justice of the Lord never comes too early, but also never comes too late. It comes at his proper time, not ours. And in the time of waiting, what he requires of us is not understanding, but faithfulness. The saying, "The revelation is still waiting for its appointed time," is like a divine clock. It counts time, not according to human hours, but according to the heartbeat of heaven. The Lord is not pressured by time markers or expectations. When he promises, he will act, but not now, rather when the time is fully ripe. Habakkuk was reminded that while awaiting the fulfillment of the revelation, he and all of God's people must live by faith. It was at that moment that a statement was given by the Lord as a pillar for all generations afterward. "The righteous shall live by faith." Not to live by wonders, not to live by emotion, not to live by convenience, but to live by faith. A faith that does not depend on circumstances, but takes root in the unchanging promise of the Lord. In the revelation given, Habakkuk saw the image of Babylon, initially the arrogant conqueror, but then becoming the target of heavenly righteousness. The proud kings will be overthrown, the fortresses of man will collapse, the systems of wickedness, though seemingly untouchable, will eventually stand before the judgment throne of the Creator. Habakkuk saw not merely an act of retribution. He saw a historical current molded by an invisible hand, where justice may be delayed, but is never forgotten. Judgment might be misunderstood as delayed, but in truth it is an opportunity for repentance. And in all that, one truth shines forth. The Lord does not merely punish, he reestablishes justice. He does not merely annihilate evil, he prepares a place for righteousness to flourish. What makes that revelation powerful is not only its content, but the impact it leaves on the one who receives it. Habakkuk, who had once trembled in confusion, is now led to a solid ground by a vision given from heaven. His faith no longer rests on what is seen, but on what the heart trusts. The one who has a revelation will not live unsteadily. They will live strongly, even if standing amidst ruins. They will not live in doubt, even if the promise has not yet come. For once the heart is illuminated by the light of the eternal vision, the temporary darkness cannot extinguish faithfulness. The Lord declared to Habakkuk, "Write this on a tablet, so that whoever reads it may run." This demonstrates that the revelation is not meant for one person alone. It is to be proclaimed, to become a sustaining flame for those weary in the race of faith. There are revelations not meant to be kept private. They must be proclaimed, even if the hearer may not understand, may not agree, or even oppose. But a true prophet does not live to be applauded. They live to be faithful. Habakkuk wrote down what he saw, not because he understood it fully, but because he trusted the one who granted it. We too are living in a time that is not yet fully realized. Many of the Lord's promises are still awaiting fulfillment. Justice is still mocked. Truth is still distorted. The people of the Lord are still disadvantaged. But if Habakkuk could believe, even with only a revelation in hand, then you and I can as well, for we have the complete Bible. We not only have the promise, but also a history of fulfillment. Not only do we have prophecy, but also the cross and the resurrection. Habakkuk saw a revelation of justice. We have a revelation of redemption, and that is enough to live. Not by what is seen, but by faith in the one who has promised and never fails. The difference between one who asks, "Why is the Lord silent?" and one who asks, "Lord, what do I need to learn in this silence?" is the difference between a young faith and a maturing faith. Habakkuk began to transform himself from wanting to control the intention of the Lord to submitting to that intention. This is not an instantaneous reorientation, but a process of honing, like metal in a furnace. The inner transformation in Habakkuk occurred when he realized that what he needed was not to change the circumstances, but to change his vision. Instead of viewing everything through human emotions, he began to see through the lens of the word of the Lord. Instead of asking, "Why does the Lord do this?" he asked, "What does the Lord want me to become in this circumstance?" For the first time on his journey, Habakkuk ceased trying to force the Lord to explain. He no longer hesitated to demand every detail of the plan. Instead, he listened, and it was in that silence that he began to see, not with the eyes of flesh, but with the eyes of faith. The truth is, faith is not measured by the number of times we receive an answer from the Lord, but by the ability to remain faithful when he has yet to speak. Faith is not the exhilaration of the spirit, but the steadfastness of the soul. Habakkuk gradually understood that spiritual maturity does not come through enlightenment, but through submission. In the darkness of his own self, Habakkuk began to recall Job, the one who was stripped of everything: family, wealth, health. Job was not warned in advance. He was not given an explanation. But after long chapters of debate, finally he exclaimed, "Before I only heard of him, but now my eyes have seen him." Habakkuk realized that there are things that can only be learned in pain. There are truths that cannot be understood by reason, only experienced through tears. And it is precisely from that collapse that a steadfast faith is reborn. Habakkuk recalled the patriarch Abraham. The Lord told him to leave his homeland, but did not specify where he would go. The Lord promised him a descendant as numerous as the stars when he had not yet even begotten a son. And he had to wait, not for a few months, but for many decades. Abraham did not understand, but he obeyed. Not because he saw, but because he believed in the one who had promised. Habakkuk began to understand that living by faith is not about having a clear roadmap, but being faithful in today's steps, even when tomorrow is still obscure. On the journey of faith, Habakkuk also recalled Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his own brothers, then falsely accused and imprisoned because of his integrity. For many years, Joseph did not know that all those sufferings were being arranged by the Lord to bring him to where he needed to be. Habakkuk recognized that sometimes what appears to be a dead end is actually a secret path prepared by the Lord. And true faith is not about avoiding wounds, but allowing those very wounds to make one more like the Lord. Habakkuk no longer needed to see Judah's victory in order to believe in the faithfulness of the Lord. He began to believe even in the midst of a time when nothing had occurred. When everything was still in chaos, he began to worship. "The righteous shall live by faith." This phrase is now no longer an abstract philosophy, but the very breath of his soul. Faith is no longer theory, but reality. It is not a smooth road, but the rugged path of worn footsteps. It is not a sweet promise, but a sharp knife that cuts away all pride and self-control. The spiritual honing led Habakkuk to understand that he did not need the Lord to act according to his own desires. He needed to learn to submit to the Lord's will. And in that submission, he found freedom, peace, relief. A person not yet refined will pray, "Lord, change my circumstances." But the one who has been refined will pray, "Lord, change me in this circumstance." Habakkuk now no longer implores for external intervention, but prays for inner transformation. And that very thing, not a miracle, not a political reversal, is the clearest sign of a maturing faith. After the journey of questioning, waiting, then receiving revelation and being honed in faith, Habakkuk did not conclude his mission with a report or a declaration. Instead, he wrote a hymn. But it was not a song of victory, nor was it a hymn composed from the good things that happened. He wrote a hymn amidst the desert, in a time when the temple had not yet collapsed, but the footsteps of Babylon were echoing near, in a time when the future of the nation was as uncertain as a lamp before the wind. And from right in the midst of that circumstance, Habakkuk cried out words that no one expected. "Though the fig tree may not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the olive crop may fail, the fields produce no food, and the flocks be cut off from the fold, I will rejoice in the Lord, I will be joyful in the God of my salvation." Hab 3:17. The fig tree, the vine, the olive, which Habakkuk proclaimed as symbols of material blessing in the scriptures. Fertile fields, full livestock in the pens, are images of assurance in ancient agricultural life. But Habakkuk enumerated all that might be lost, and he affirmed that even if all those things vanish, his heart would still sing. This is not resignation, but a type of supernatural joy. A joy that does not come from circumstances, but from the foundation. Circumstances may change, but the foundation does not. Habakkuk discovered that the source of his joy was not in the fields, but in the Lord. He did not feign happiness. He did not write the hymn to appear strong. He sang because he had been touched by a higher reality. His worship did not arise from success, but arose from submission. Habakkuk teaches us that praising the Lord is not an act reserved only for when everything is fine. Rather, it is precisely in the midst of everything falling apart that praise becomes a spiritual weapon. A declaration that the Lord still is the ruler. A person who loses his job can still praise. A person wrestling with illness can still praise. A person betrayed, alone, or standing by a loved one's grave can still praise. Not because they deny the pain, but because they exalt one greater than that pain. Praise in the midst of the desert is an act of spiritual rebellion. It tells the world, it tells the devil, it tells one's own soul that, no matter what happens, I will still believe. Even though I do not see a miracle, I will still sing. The joy in Habakkuk is not a temporary excitement. It is not produced by positive circumstances. It is born from an intimate relationship with the Lord, and that means no one can take it away. The fig tree may not blossom, the vine may not bear fruit, the pens may be empty, but the Lord still is the Lord. And true joy does not need an external reason. It only needs a firm foundation within. Habakkuk did not deny the reality. He clearly saw what was happening and what was about to happen, but he did not let that reality obscure the truth. The truth greater than every event is, the Lord is still there. And as long as the Lord is still there is still reason to sing. Habakkuk wrote, "I will rejoice in the Lord." The phrase "will rejoice" is an active act. Joy does not always come on its own. Sometimes it must be chosen. Habakkuk did not wait for positive emotions. He chose to worship first. On the journey of faith, there will be times when you feel nothing at all. Then, praise is an act of will, not of feeling. And that is precisely what makes it precious. You praise not because you desire to, but because you know the one you worship is worthy. Habakkuk wrote a hymn in the midst of the desert. And from then until now, millions of believers all over the world have been strengthened by that very song. For it is not only the words of a prophet, but the common voice of all who have learned that true joy is not a gift of circumstances, but the fruit of faith. Habakkuk is not a spiritual superhero. He did not live in continuous mystery, nor did he have a life filled with miracles. He is a human being, just like you, like me. who knows pain, who knows doubt, and dares to ask questions of heaven. But it is precisely from that place that he became a symbol of a genuine faith. A faith that knows how to cry, knows how to ask, yet still knows how to worship. A faith that does not need an answer to believe, but chooses to believe even when there is no answer. Dear friend, if you are going through a period of spiritual drought, if you are carrying questions that no one has been able to answer, then remember that the Lord is not afraid of your questions. He only awaits your offering them with a faithful heart. You do not need to pretend to be strong. You do not need to have all the right answers memorized. You only need to come near him sincerely, just as Habakkuk did. For the journey of Habakkuk, from questioning, waiting, to worship, can also be your journey. Perhaps today you have not seen results, have not seen a miracle, have not seen a door open, but you can still sing, you can still pray, you can still move forward. And sometimes, continuing to walk in the midst of darkness is the clearest light of faith. Thank you for watching until the end of today's video. If the story of Habakkuk has touched you, please share your thoughts in the comments section. And do not forget to subscribe to the Jesus Stories channel, where we together explore real, profound, and hopeful journeys of faith in the Word of the Lord. Please share this video with a friend who needs encouragement. Who knows, your faith today may become the lamp that lights the way for someone else tomorrow. See you again in the upcoming videos of Jesus Stories, where biblical stories are not only retold, but also relived.